spend some time in the. Hi y'all. Thought I'd bring a little note to you of encouragement. You know, I was spent a little time in the Navy, and I was in the Vietnam War, and I thank the Lord I was on board ship. And I didn't really get it into the in the midst of the battle. But you know, seemed like there's all kind of battles, some in sports and some real wars. And you know, like football, basketball, baseball, soccer, volleyball, you got all these games, and they're actually sports, but they're battles to see who can do the best, and they against each other. Well, we've got one, and we also have personal battles, and this is one thing I was going to talk about. We're all soldiers, whether it's indirect or like actual military soldiers, or whether we kind of personal soldiers. This is what I want to talk about, and I'd like to start with a song, and then I have somebody I'd like to talk about who had a real battle. And so what I want to talk about, well, whose battle is it anyway? Is it yours? Or who you fighting against? Is it a real fight? Let's go into this and see. But first I want to sing this song, Onward Christian Soldiers. Onward Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Christ the royal master leads against the foe, forward into battle, see his banners go. Onward Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. And I have a question. Whose battle is it anyway? Who are we fighting against? And are we trying to fight ourselves? Are we trained for this fight? And who's helping us in this battle? You know, there's a scripture that says, and let's go. I want to take you to Ephesians chapter 6, and we're going to read this verse. I think it's verse 12. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12. It says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." So, you know, we may think that we fighting against our neighbor, but it's a bigger battle than what we think it is. And I'd like to bring up somebody who had a real battle, and were they really prepared for it? You know, in the Bible, there was a man named Jehoshaphat, and he reigned after his dad Asa, and he took over the throne of Judah. Sorry about that. So before we get into it, let's have a short prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for being with us. Help us in these battles, and help us to learn that if we depend on you, we won't have to fight so hard. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, in 2 Chronicles, this King Jehoshaphat is covered in 2 Chronicles chapter 17 through 20. So there's 4 chapters that talks about him. And in verse 1 of chapter 17, and Jehoshaphat his son reigned in his stead and strengthened himself against Israel. Now, we're going to just kind of hit some highlights here. Okay, he had, let's see, the Lord, on verse 3, and the Lord was with Jehoshaphat because he walked in the first ways of his father David and sought not unto Balaam. Balaam was not a good name. Balaam was against God and did his own thing, and this is one Jehoshaphat did not follow. He followed the Lord. And so in verse 5, the Lord established the kingdom in his hand, and all Judah brought to Jehoshaphat presents, and he had riches and honor in abundance. So see, when you set your heart with the Lord and you do his will, he'll give you all the things that you need to do his will, with joy in your heart and praising him. Now, he went through all Judah and he taught. He had men of God to go to all the cities of Judah and to teach them from the law of God. And his power increased. Now, as we go on down through chapter 17, he had the numbers of his men of war, say, cities of Judah, men of valor, 300,000 men in Judah. And then Jehohanan the captain had 280,000. And in Zikri, Amasiah, he had 200,000 mighty men of valor. And with Eliada, he had, with the bow and shield, 200,000. And with Jehozabad, 180,000. And he's ready for the war. Now, you do some addition on that, and see what kind of army Jehoshaphat actually had, and then kind of compare that with the armed forces of these United States, and you see he had a pretty good army, and these men were trained and ready for battle. Now, to show God was with him, Jehoshaphat allied with Ahab. Ahab, he wasn't a good guy. He was not a good king, because he didn't follow after the Lord. And he's trying to convince Jehoshaphat to go up to battle with him. But there was a prophet named Micaiah that they called and spake, because Ahab said, he never said anything good about me. And he told him that yeah, if you want to go up there, you ain't going to live through it. That's just paraphrasing. But you have to read in chapter 18, it talks about Micaiah's true prophecy, starting in verse 12. But you read that, and I'm just trying to give some highlights. But there's something that we want to learn from this. Now, because Jehoshaphat went with him anyway, and Ahab trying to trick Jehoshaphat a little bit and talking about, well, I'm going to put on one of your robes. I'm going to put on a robe and disguise myself. And when they came up against him, they saw actually who it was. It was Jehoshaphat. And so they turned from him. And then there was one of the soldiers that just shot an arrow, and it hit Ahab, got him in the chest. And he died that evening about time battle was over. And so now Jehoshaphat was in 19, there was a prophet named Jehu. He jumped on Jehoshaphat's case in chapter 19. And he told him that, man, you shouldn't have got with him. But read the chapter for yourself so you can actually see what it says. But he said that you're still a good man and you still love the Lord. And so he set priests in chapter 19. He saw, let the fear, in verse 7, he said, wherefore now let the fear of the Lord be upon you. Take heed and do it, for there is no iniquity with the Lord our God, nor respect of persons, nor taking of gifts. Now you see, Jehoshaphat is still keeping his people close to the Lord. Are we staying close to the Lord? Are we keeping our families, our people, are we keeping them close to the Lord? What are we doing? What is our relationship with Christ? What is your relationship with Christ? And now there is there came, okay, in chapter 20, in verses 1 and 2, it came to pass after this also that the children of Moab and the children of Ammon, and with them other besides the Ammonites, came against Jehoshaphat to battle. Then there came some that told Jehoshaphat, saying, there cometh a great multitude against thee from beyond the sea on this side Syria. And behold, they are in Hazazon Tamar, which is Engedi. Okay, there's several armies have joined together because knowing that Jehoshaphat has such a great army, they have come against him. And they come to defeat Jehoshaphat, take over his land, his people, and all the goods that he has. But there's one thing about Jehoshaphat, he prays for deliverance. And now I'm going to read you a little bit in chapter 20, starting at verse 3. And Jehoshaphat feared and set himself to seek the Lord and proclaimed the fast throughout all Judah. Now, throughout